This video is going to focus on the CSWE, which is the Council on Social Work Education, their core competencies, and how that plays out into your social work education here at Kuiper. This really has nothing to do with HPSI 2. We just decided that this is the class that we talk about it in. I don't enjoy talking about it necessarily, especially in this hybrid format, because we have so much to cover in 7 weeks. I don't necessarily want to spend a lot of time focusing on this. Previous years, you would have a quiz on this that students really hated. So you do not have a quiz on this. You can thank COVID for that. So one positive thing. This is really just some information. I hesitate to talk about how much I don't like teaching it, just because I don't want to give you preconceived notions that this is going to suck. Because there is some really good content and it's good for us to know, but it's not something that you're going to be tested on. It's not something that you have to know specifically word for word. I just want to give you a brief overview on what this means and what this looks like in your social work education. It'll probably come into the most play your senior year when you do your internship, because you have to write your learning contract based on the competencies. So it is good to kind of have an awareness that they exist, but you don't have to know them verbatim. So, skipping that. Okay, so what am I talking about? So Kuiper is accredited by the Council of Social Work Education. They are the ones that say, hey, your education, the way you teach, the material that you teach, qualifies you to receive a BSW at the end of your education. Without this accreditation, you would just have a Bachelor's of Science in Human Services, which isn't necessarily a negative thing. It is just, it doesn't hold as much weight in the social work world. Where I would see this play the most part is when you would work in different social work settings that billed insurances or Medicaid. They weren't allowed to bill for services unless the provider, so the case manager, the social worker, had a BSW. They wouldn't be able to bill it if they had a different degree. So it's a very credible degree. Nothing against Bachelor's of Science in Human Services. It just doesn't hold as much weight, and it's really actually something awesome that we can offer, especially if you're thinking about getting your master's. Our program, because we hold this accreditation, can get you advanced standing for your master's, which means you only have to take like 1 year of your master's versus 2. So that's pretty awesome. Basically, an accredited college has to have a lot of evidence that students know how to practice social work, not that they just learned it, but that they can actually do it and apply it. So that's how we center our lectures, our assignments, are really practice focused. Unfortunately, COVID has really hit a lot of what we do. Traditionally in HPSI 2, you would have assignments where you would have to go into the community and interview people and create a whole resource kit for different life stages, but we can't go into agencies right now. So that kind of takes a piece of that practice and going and engaging, and now we just have to do it behind a computer screen, which I hate. But such is life. We'll get through this. We're still accredited. It just looks a little bit different. So the CSWE currently has 10 competencies, so things that you have to show that you're competent in order to receive your BSW upon graduation. And so to show our accreditors, because we get audited, they come in and make sure that what we're doing is what we say we're doing and that our students are actually doing well. We have to create a signature assignment. So each class has a signature assignment that demonstrates some competency, and we have to fill all these forms out. Nothing that you guys have to do, but we have to do on our end. So I'm not going to read through all of these. I'm going to give you a nice, lovely summary. So these are the 11 competencies that we measure at Kuiper. Last slide I said that there was 10. Now I'm saying there's 11. Well, the CSWE requires 10. We add the 11th one right here, which is the Understand the Biblical Reformed Worldview. Very Kuiper of us, but it really helps kind of differentiate our program. Helps us stay true to who we are as a college, but also still being able to get a BSW. We kind of integrate the two. So these competencies cover a wide variety of activities, pieces of development. And so you're just really focusing on like developing yourself as a professional social worker, making sure you're ethical, highlighting research, understanding human environments, being able to work with populations from individuals, families, groups, communities, so from small to big, and just kind of staying on top of what's most current in literature, making sure that you're responding to the client in their environment versus just a client in general. So those are all 10 of these are just very fancy ways of saying what I just said. And so you'll see when you get to your senior year on your learning contract that there's a competency, and then you're going to have to identify a practice behavior, and then a learning activity. Essentially, a competency, they are the measurable practice behaviors, and then it breaks it down into what the practice behaviors are, and then it breaks it down into learning activities, which show how a practice behavior is going to be achieved. So you can kind of see that on the screen is that a competency is very broad. So like, what do we want to achieve? We want to achieve being a professional social worker. So how are we going to achieve this? We are going to do X, Y, and Z. And then the learning activity is going to break it down even further. So I'm using on the next slide, because this gets really confusing. Again, you don't necessarily have to know this verbatim. It's a lot of information that I at least need to tell you, and hopefully you'll retain a little bit of it. But if you're looking at, let's say you're a basketball coach and you want your players to be competent in making all types of different basketball shots. So you don't want them all to be just good at three-pointers. You want them to be able to do three-pointers and free throws and jump shots and bank shots and whatever other shots there are. You can tell I didn't really play basketball. And so you need to figure out a plan to get your players to be competent in making all different kinds of shots. So the competency, or even like a goal you could say that you identified, is that you're going to engage in a variety of basketball shots. So now you have to figure out what you're going to be doing to like what behaviors are you going to do to accomplish that goal. And so you're going to use practice time to learn different types of shots. Kind of vague, not really measurable. It's kind of just, did you do this? Yes or no. You don't really know if it's making you get closer to your goal. It's also using shooting drill to improve ability to make each shot. Again, rather vague. The only way to measure it is if it's yes or no. You're not necessarily showing if it's helping you reach your goal. So that's where the learning activities come in. You have to get specific there, and that at every practice, players will shoot 15 free throws, 15 jump shots, 15 layups, and 15 three-pointers as their warm-up, with the goal of making 85% of each shot. So this is where you can measure to see if your players are becoming competent, because you have very specific activities they're engaging in with a measurable end in sight. And so for us, we have a competency that CSWE identifies. Our practice behavior is the signature assignment, usually that we create, and then the learning activity is performing the signature assignment, and then our goal is to have that students need to have an 85% on the signature assignment in order to show competency. Hopefully that makes sense. This is actually a good model to learn too, because often if you get into a case management role as a social worker, you have to write treatment plans. And this is kind of the format that treatment plans get written in, that you have a goal, you have a behavior, and then you have a measurable activity. So this is actually, outside of just being a competency lecture, it does give you a practical tool to kind of get used to. So yay. All right, so what does this really just mean for you? You are going to find that myself and whatever other professor that you have in the social work program, we're going to focus on the outcomes of learning. It's not just a matter of us teaching you and telling you how to do social work, but giving you practical information to help you demonstrate that you actually know how to be an effective social worker. So there's an accountability piece to us, that we're giving you good education and that we're actually giving you practical tools and not just word vomit all the time. So it addresses what you're expected to do, again, all that practice and active language, versus like what you're expected to learn about. And this is really because social work is a hands-on field. You can be the most competent and most articulate person in regards to what the code of ethics says, but if you have no idea how to implement the code of ethics, you're not going to really be an effective social worker. You might know how to act. You might know all the perfect questions to ask in a counseling session, but if you don't know how to engage with a client, you're not going to be an effective social worker. So we really, really want to take this time as students and as learners to teach you how to do it versus teaching you just the words about it. We want to give you the practice ability. So I'm going to go through these very fast. I'll post this PowerPoint in case you want to look back on it for reference, but this is just kind of in a really brief overview of how you see the competencies and signature assignments. So signature assignments are just the assignments that are created to hit the competency. So for HIPC 1, which you guys were just in, the David Pelzer paper was the signature assignment because it hit on the competency of looking at the person's behavior in their environment. There you go. All right, so the first competency is professional identity. You'll see that pop up in communities where you will create an agency within the class and then host an event within Grand Rapids. This one has been modified slightly right now because of COVID. Unfortunately, we can't do this, so we're going to focus more on grant writing versus actually creating an organization. But hopefully by the time you guys get to communities, it will be back to normal. Core competency 2 is about ethical practice. And so that will be in capstone when you write your big, huge 50-plus page paper. You have to talk about an ethical dilemma. Critical thinking, this is the one that we use for HIPC 2. I'm going to give you a case study at the end of the semester, and you're asked to analyze it through all the stuff we learned about HIPC, take into community resources that we'll learn about in group projects, and just talk about best practices for that life stage. So you get that to look forward to. The diversity competency naturally is going to be part of human diversity, and you'll use a case study for that. Human rights and justice, we integrate into international social work by presenting at Global Advocacy and Awareness Day. Again, this one has gotten significantly modified because of COVID because we can't hold Global Advocacy Day. So we'll be continuing to explore what that will look like, but still being able to show that we have educated you on human rights and justice. Research competency is naturally going to be part of a research class, and so we don't just teach you how to do research, but we have you do a research project either for the college or for an agency in the community. Human behavior was the David Pelzer paper because you looked at person environment over time through the 3 books. Policy, naturally going to be in policy because you're going to write your own policy, most likely for the college. Practice context, it will go back to the communities and organizations class, just talking about how different contexts will influence the type of approach you take, and that kind of lends into creating the agency. Core competency 10 is a large one because it talks about engaging, assessing, intervening, evaluating, which are the stages of the general method. And so that comes into play in individuals and families and groups because you get to videotape yourself running an individual therapy session and a group session. As a student when I was at Kuiper, this one gave me so much anxiety and dread. As a professor, I love this because I love seeing you guys in action and being able to practice what you learn. And then the reformed worldview goes into the capstone class because you write about it in your paper. I'm going to skip this because I have just given you a lot of information. Basically, that is what drives your education. That's why we do what we do. And hopefully you find it to be effective and I don't know what word I was going to say. But that it works for you and gets you what you need from your education to be an effective social worker. So hopefully that wasn't too brutal. The video ended up being longer than I wanted to be, so hopefully you made it through it all and will love this content for the rest of your life.